Welcome to the Battle Buddy Podcast with Keith McKeever.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Battle Buddy Podcast. I have Donna, known as D.A. Michaels by her pen name, I believe is what they call that. I'm not much of an author, so but she is the author of Courageously Broken. I've actually got it on the shelf behind me. I can't believe I pointed to that correctly, the way things happen in the camera. But Donna has an amazing story. The title of the book is called Courageously Broken. I'll throw that up here. You can go to courageouslybroken.com and find it. It is an amazing story of her time in the Navy and getting out, just going through life and figuring things out and all these little things that I think this is what's relatable about the book as I read it was we all have little things that happen to us, little things, big things, medium-sized things, whatever you want to say, that happen to us throughout life, and we have to get through it. And some things can break you, but you just have to have the courage to go through it. And I thought that was a very interesting title after reading the book. I don't think you could have picked a better one. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Donna.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Oh, so have I. Especially the farther and farther I got through your book, I was like, oh, okay, all right. You know, when it comes to authors, I want to read the book, first and see exactly what they're talking about so I can pull out questions. And it seemed like every chapter I was like, wow, there's good little bits in here. It's going to be hard to keep this, keep the questions short.
Yeah, well, I've had a crazy life.
You have definitely had a lot of different things happen. But on the book itself, I just kind of want to start there and we'll kind of go into the contents of the book. What made you, or what event happened in life where you just had that flip of a switch in your head and say, I need to write a book on my life?
Well, it's kind of funny. All through my life, I had an old boss once, and she nicknamed me Black Cloud Follows because I got a little Native American in me. And she's like, you need an Indian name. She's like, Black Cloud Follows. And she's like, because if something's going to happen, it's going to happen to you. And I'm like, gee, thanks. So every time something would come along, she'd be like, Black Cloud Follows. And, as life would go on, when it's you don't think much of it. You think this is normal. Crap happens to everybody. And then somebody, once in a while I'd hear, you need to write a book. And I'd just laugh and go, yeah, well, I'm still waiting on my Prince Charming and my Happily Ever After. And, maybe when that comes along, I'll know how to end it. Or somebody will write it about me after I'm dead, one or the other. So I never really sat down to write a book. What happened is I had one too many traumas, which we'll get into, I'm sure. And I had one too many traumas, and as a veteran and as a 21-year, or at the time a 17-year law enforcement officer, it sent me down a really dark, bad rabbit hole. As I'm sure but a lot of people don't know, 22 veterans a day commit suicide. And unfortunately, the first responder community isn't tracking it as well as they should. But we know we are losing far more to suicide than we are in the line of duty deaths. It's pretty bad. So on 2017, I was one of them. I didn't actually attempt it, but I had a pretty hardcore, foolproof plan. And I got as far as putting my daughter on a plane, sent her out of state because I didn't want her around when I did it. And I made that one phone call that people usually make. Just to one of my best friends who was the worst at answering his phone, like hands down, the guy never answered voicemail. So I just assumed like any other day I was going to get a voicemail and, that would be it. But he answered his phone. And as soon as he did, obviously caught me off guard because in my mind, I'd played out the voicemail and I just lost it. And I started crying, and he didn't take him long. He's a veteran, he PTSD as well. Didn't take him long to figure out where my head was and what I was planning to do. And he spent 8 hours on the phone with me that day, convincing me that as bad as I thought it was never that bad, and that there was ways that I could get help without losing my job, because that was why I was so afraid of asking for help. And in our first responder community, you just like a veteran community, I believe, used to be, in some places I hear still is, sadly. If you ask for help, man, you got a label and you're done. And I'm like, I ain't going out that way. I don't want the shame, the embarrassment. What if they haul me off to the local mental hospital? I was terrified. So even you get to the demons get the best of you, and you're like, that's it. I'd rather just die than go through all that humiliation. As crazy as that sounds, I mean, that is what the demons tell you. So long story short, got therapy, and while I was in therapy for a while, I asked my doctor, I said, hey, I can understand why I've suppressed bad memories, but why can't I remember good? I get together with my veteran friends and we talk about, the old times and stupid crap and the things that make you just laugh your butt off. And I felt like what's wrong with me? Why can't I remember these things? And, oh, come on, you were there. And I'm like, I don't remember. Or there would be like a snapshot in my brain, but I couldn't remember the details. So I asked my counselor and she says, well, do you journal? I'm like, I did when I was a kid, and I've always enjoyed writing. I mean, as a cop, we write a lot of police reports,
Yeah,
so,
you better enjoy it somewhat.
Yeah, I do actually really enjoy writing, and I'm told I'm very good at it. I've always gotten compliments on my writing. So I started journaling, and what the counselor told me to do is when I got to a part of my life that I couldn't remember or I wanted to remember, call somebody from that period, sit down, have them fill you in. And as time went on and I was doing this journal, it was like, and I don't do puzzles, but in a way my brain was a puzzle, right? So it was almost like sitting across the table from a good friend and putting a puzzle together over a good conversation, filling in the gaps, putting the pieces together. And as I continued to do this, it was extraordinarily cathartic. Like it's like almost like it was like I was counseling myself, like, oh, well, this thing happened and it sucked really bad. But if that hadn't happened, then this opportunity over here wouldn't have come along. And that was a really good thing, right? So all of a sudden, all the pieces started fitting together in my head. And I realized, yeah, I've gone through some nasty crap. But at the end of the day, I was able to find the good in it, maybe why I went through that, because it later down the road, something good came from it, right? So that was it. So after a while, I shared my journal with a very close friend, and he told me that if I was ever willing to share my story, that I could probably help people with it, that they would realize, I'm not the only one that goes through this crap. I'm not alone, and it's getting help sucks. I never lie to people. I'm like, getting therapy sucks. Going through counseling sucks. I wanted to quit many times, but I also knew I didn't want to go down that hole again. So many days I forced myself to go, and eventually, and it wasn't like a switch one day where it just went, I'm better. It was almost like a delayed reaction. I want to say it was probably 2 years after I went through cognitive processing therapy that all of a sudden it was like it clicked, right? And things started to make sense. I tell people one of the most positive things that came from CPT was I learned my triggers. I would find myself in situations where I would just lose my shit and get really pissed. And sorry, are we allowed to curse?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I know this is a long answer to your question, but long story short, it was a personal journal. And I was convinced that if I turned it into a book, I could help others. I wasn't real comfortable with the idea because, as you know, there are some really personal stories in there. That was scary. And then someone I knew actually did commit suicide. And it hurt me because I was the last person he spoke to, and I had no idea. There was absolutely no signs whatsoever. He was perfectly fine the day I talked to him. 2 weeks later, I got a text message from his phone, and it was his brother who had gone through it and saw that I was one of the last people he talked to, and he wanted to know what our conversation was about. And I gave him as much information as I could, but I was just dumbfounded because I was like, he was fine. I don't understand. And then his brother filled me in on from the time I talked to him to the time he killed himself, which was about 2 weeks. I had gone out of town, and we were supposed to get together when I got back. And something had happened, and that was his straw that broke the camel back. And he went from being perfectly fine to making a plan and executing it in a matter of 2 weeks. And it hurt. And I felt like, did I miss something? Is there something I could have done? It sucked. And I thought, all right, that's it. If my book will stop one person from committing suicide, then so what? So I aired my dirty laundry out there. We've all got skeletons in closets, and mine are flying free now. And I got to tell you, I don't care. I don't know if it's part of getting older as a woman, but at some point we just don't give a shit. It's like, I'm not a saint, never pretended to be one. I'm human. I've made mistakes. I've learned from them, and I've moved on.
Yeah, you got to learn. what do they call it? College of Hard Knocks.
Oh, for sure.
All those bumps and bruises you're going to pick up along the way in life. They're going to teach you things, and you need to look out the right way and figure out what those lessons that the universe is trying to teach you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, losing your friend, that's got to be tough. But unfortunately, I think that there's a lot of people that do that there's no signs.
Oh, as a police officer, I've responded to countless, literally countless. And you talk to the wives, the kids, the friends, the best friends, the brothers, and they're all like, I don't understand. They were doing great. And we have a theory that someone has been struggling and then all of a sudden they're in a good place. That's a red flag in and of itself, because that means they've actually finally made the decision to do it and they're just planning it out. They've come to the decision, they're going to do it, and it's a matter of the opportunity. I just talked to a family the other day. I mean, they lost a father and a husband, and it was, they still can't wrap their head around it, because the way he did it, it was physically impossible based on the physical condition he was in. But he was so he felt like a burden to his family. He had to be cared for around the clock because of some medical issues. And they still don't understand how he managed to do what he did, given his physical condition. But that's how, and they said that night, in particularly when he said goodnight, he was like in really good spirits. I'm like, he knew what he was going to do. He had it all figured out. So. Yeah,
I think there's probably a lot of clarity in that, that kind of, I guess I'll say, don't give a shit attitude. Mm-hmm. Like you don't care anymore, because all of the burdens, all the things that are on your shoulders, you have taken them off at that point, and you don't care, and you made up your mind. And
but they don't understand that they pass that pain to everyone they leave behind, and that's the part that they forget. And I'm grateful that I had my daughter, because that was, in hindsight, I think that's why I made that phone call. That was my last. Even though I had a plan and everything, I wasn't in that euphoric, I've made up my mind, this is how I'm going to do it, skippity-doo-dah-day state of mind. Sorry, my German Shepherd's bored if you heard that loud moan just then. He's over the corner. But I never got to that point because I was struggling with the fact that I was going to leave my daughter. And that scared me, because I'm like, well, who's going to raise her, and are they going to raise her the way I want her raised? And I think I'm so grateful that I have my daughter, because that's likely, in hindsight, what made me make that phone call and made me listen to the person who talks sense into me. For sure.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
So how difficult was it? I mean, you kind of said it's kind of easy-ish to journal and just kind of put down your thoughts, but like, how was it when that book was about to be released? Like, where were your nerves at? Like, you've put all your stuff in this book, you're ready to launch it, and then all of a sudden, like, the moment it launches, like, how difficult was that?
Technically difficult or emotionally difficult?
Emotionally difficult. I'm sure there's a lot of technical bumps in the roads.
Emotionally, I was ready. And it was because technically it had kicked my butt, right? As we were talking before we went on air, I'm not a technical person at all. And it was like, it seemed like, even though I had an editor and somebody that fixed it, every time I read through the book myself to make sure it was absolutely the way I wanted, I kept finding things I wanted to change. And oh no, this, I don't like this, the way this is worded, it didn't matter. And finally somebody says, Donna, just let it go. You could read it 10 years from now and you're still going to find things you're going to want to change. Let it go. It's good. Just let it go. So emotionally, I was ready, because the hard road from the time I decided to publish to actually publishing was mentally exhausting. I can't even count how many nights I was up. I pulled 24 hours. I pulled all-nighters on the website, fixing this and fixing that and uploading this and trying to figure out why I got a kickback and an error and a lot of technical stuff that I learned, and And I, again, a blessing in disguise, I was able to do this because I was out with a work injury, and it was right when COVID started. So I had torn my rotator cuff, and surgery was, we didn't know when surgery was going to be because of COVID. So I was sitting at home waiting on surgery, couldn't work, couldn't do anything, but I could sit with a keyboard in my lap. And I would sit many, many, many nights, tweaking and learning and trial by error. And it was exhausting. No regrets. And, I know people that have spent a lot of money paying someone to do all that work, albeit got full-time jobs and don't have the time to do that. I get it. But I had the time and I did it myself. So I'll tell you, I hired a professional editor, of course, because you never want to edit your own work. And I hired, my daughter designed the cover of it.
Oh, that's cool.
On her tablet. Yep. She's the artsy one. I didn't get that gene. She designed it, and then we sent it to a professional who knows how to do the templates and make it fit, because it's all based on how many pages is in the book, and you've got the wraparound that comes inside where there's the help me out, the reviews.
Oh,
reviews.
Yeah, I got
like the flap that comes inside.
Yeah.
So you gotta hire a professional for that stuff. But she did design. She basically did it was her, that cover was her idea, and she drafted it on an iPad Pro, and then we sent it to the graphics artist, and he basically just redid it in the proper software format and all that other stuff.
That's awesome. Good for her for being artistic, because I'm with you, Donna. My artistic abilities are pretty much limited to stick figures. That's
Oh, I get it. That's why I joked when I was in law enforcement, my agency, we didn't have to do crash investigations. And it was I think twice in my 21-year career, I had to actually sit down and draw like draw a picture in a report to explain how something happened. Oh, it was like torture, and I used to look and I go, I don't know how traffic investigators do it, because they've got to drive the cars and then the lines and then, where the cars hit. And I'm like, now they got great software that does it for them, thank God. But back in the old days, we didn't have that. We had to handwrite it, and I was terrible at it.
Yeah, it'd be a lot of math back in the day. I was Air Force Security Forces, and I was lucky and grateful to this day that they never sent me to a course like that. But I knew a few guys that did go to it, they would come back and they're like, man, that is straight up brutal.
Oh, it is.
And I was like, well, I'm not good at math. I mean, I can do simple math, but the moment you start getting angles and stuff, I don't want nothing to do with that.
And then they apply the brakes and all that physics comes into play. It's like, nope.
I'd much rather just look at the scene and try to determine what happens, but don't make me try and figure out, all this complicated math. I was actually, that actually happened to me a week and a half ago, something like that. I had hopped on the interstate, and I'm just driving down the road, and all of a sudden I see this car, 2 cars ahead of me, just hit the guardrail and spin around. Like, didn't even see it happen really at first. It was just car hits it, and I see the radiator, and I slam on my brakes, and the truck behind me does, truck in front of me does, whatever. We get all out and get traffic stopped. It was 4 cars that were included in it. That wrapped me up for about 2.5 hours. We got stuck in between the response vehicles. I was talking to a couple of ladies in the lead car, and we just kind of sat there just on the side of the road, just like, well, we are stuck here until they get this cleaned up and investigated. And it was the middle of nowhere.
And as a cop, I will say thank you for being so patient and understanding, because I have been cursed out more times than I can count for having to stop traffic on a traffic fatality accident, where you can't let anybody go through. It's a crime scene, people get you mad, but I just live right there. I just need to go right there. Sorry, you're gonna have to go out and around or find another way, but you can't go through here, and people just don't understand,
Yeah, luckily there was a big gap. There was a guy behind me, and there was a big gap between us and vehicles behind us, and they were able to stop, and there was a couple of semis kind of blocked traffic, and then me and the guy behind me and the guy in front of me. So there's basically 4 vehicles right behind the 4 that got in the accident. 3 of us jumped out and went and checked on the vehicles. And one guy got out, busted up nose and everything. I was like, sit down next to the guardrail. Don't be walking around. Another woman climbed out of the car. I don't know how her face wasn't all messed up with the airbags. And then there was a 16-year-old in one car that was just like frantic. And I was like, don't get out of the vehicle.
Hysterical.
I don't see anything. I don't see anything leaking. Stay in here. Somebody's already called 911. She was on the phone with her mom and just a
And then
crazy
mom comes
situation.
freaking out, right? Mom shows up.
Yeah, they showed up.
Yeah.
The one kid that had to bust it up knows his dad. Like, ironically, both of them had their parents were on the same interstate behind them. Both of them, unrelated people. Their parents were, mile behind, 2 miles behind, something like that. So they
Wow.
traffic and got there real quick. And luckily, me and the other two guys, we just kind of made sure everybody was fine. The cops showed up and we're like, everybody seems fine. You might want to go check on her first and go check on them. And we stayed around and gave statements. I didn't see nothing except for the radiator, but yeah, it was definitely one of those things. Like, well, there goes. Luckily, I didn't have an appointment for like 2 hours. I'm like, I'm not going anywhere anyway. So luckily, I'm not missing anything or shifting schedules around. But it was nice to be able to be there and help and comfort people down. But back to the book. So the beginning of your book is full of stories that are both surprising and not surprising at the same time. So we kind of jumped right into the book here, but you were, let me get this right, an administrative person in the Navy assigned to a SEAL unit.
That's correct.
And the stories that you describe of partying and guys jumping off balconies and jumping into pools and doing all kinds of other stuff.
With their faces on fire.
Yeah, with their faces on fire. It's one of those things. I'm reading through it and I'm just like, it surprises me, but yet it doesn't surprise me. Because as military members in general were crazy.
The military police hated us. I was the getaway driver on many occasions.
I bet you were. I bet. And I think about that from that law enforcement experience, being Air Force Security Forces, and I'm just like, man, that would just the calls that would come in on that. I'm sure people are sitting at a law enforcement desk saying, "What? There's a guy jumping off a balcony with his face on fire." I mean, that's just.
And everybody's cheering him on. That's the funny part. Yeah, because he stands up and he goes, "I'm okay." It's just. Oh, I mean, we used to joke, like, we've heard of stop, drop, and roll, but man, that's taking it to the extreme,
That is definitely taking it to the extreme. So what is like do you have any stories, crazy stories like that happened that didn't make it in your book? Anything you can think of?
Oh gosh. Oh, we just thought of one the other day that I'm like, oh, I wish I would have put that in the book. All right, I got a good story, especially for your veteran listeners out there. Now, it's my understanding, my caveat is that the military isn't the way it used to be. So
it changes over time.
For the listeners, we're going back to the, late 80s, early 90s. Okay, times have changed. Dear friend of mine, I won't mention his name, was at a party, and as a guy, if somebody's in the bathroom, where do you go? Outside, near the bushes, up against a fence post, whatever,
Wherever's convenient.
Right. Problem was, it was in the neighborhood, and the neighbor was some high-ranking. Was it a general? I was either an officer or a civilian, but it was somebody of high rank, and his wife was not the most pleasant person, and she happened to be upstairs and looked out her window, and there's my boy with his junk hanging out, peeing against the fence post, peeing against, he thinks he's concealed, but from up above on a 2-story house looking down, she can see over the fence line, right? So she files a complaint that, as if it was a sexual in nature, that he flashed her. And it was like, no, he was urinating. And he was trying to do it concealed, but again, didn't know. Well, everybody kind of laughed it off at first, and it was basically, don't do that again. But she was furious, and it's my understanding that the people that actually occupied that house were always throwing wild parties, so this was an ongoing problem. He just was the wrong place at the wrong time, right?
So she's what we nowadays call a Karen.
Yes. Oh, she was very much a Karen. Yeah. So she made this big stink of it. And he ended up if I can remember correctly, I think he went to captain's mast, and then the skipper was like, all right, man, don't do that anymore, kind of a deal, right? Which
Use the bathroom, not the bushes.
Basically, don't go peeing outside. And then that wasn't good enough, and I guess then the skipper's butt was going to be on the line for the way he handled it. They ended up court-martialing this poor kid. He was an E4 or 5, I can't remember. They busted him down to an E1. Took away he was a boat guy. He wasn't a SEAL, what they call SWICs now. Took away his NEC, sent him to the fleet. And for a long time, nobody heard from him. He did marry his sweetheart down there, as he was leaving country. He had met a girl and sweetheart. They got married and he kind of just disappeared. Well, then, fast forward, whatever, 20 years and social media and the internet, and we've all like reconnected and found each other via Facebook or whatever. And he ended up rising to the ranks of Command Master Chief, Sailor of the Year, and had an extraordinary career in the fleet. And I think he ended up in the aviation community, if I'm not mistaken, and just retired after 30 something years, a couple of years ago. And still a fantastic, great guy. And I'm so proud of him, because so many people could have easily said, screw this, I'm out of here, but
he could ruin a lot of people. If you just don't take that the right way.
Yeah. But see, now it's my understanding, you get in trouble now for something really even the most minor things, and you get easily kicked out nowadays, versus the old days, people got away with a lot. As long as it wasn't like a felony crime or anything like horrific, stupid drunken shenanigans was just common everyday occurrences. It was whether or not you got a DUI was a different story, right?
Oh yeah, it's always a different story.
Yeah, but I mean, as long as it didn't rise to the level of being criminal, you could pretty much get away with about any level of stupidity, because their attitude was, well, you survived, so you're stronger.
Yeah, definitely a little different probably when I was in, but I've been out for 10 years now, and I don't know what I think they kick people out for just about anything these days.
Yeah, I know.
I saw my fair share of dumb stuff. Might have partaken in some dumb stuff myself that could have gotten me at least a big slap on the wrist or a boot out the door, but we won't go there.
No, I get it.
That's one of those what happens there stays there kind of.
Oh yeah, totally.
Stories. I don't know if I ever write a book. Maybe it'll come out in a book. I don't know.
Hey, I mean, I would like to see a bunch. You know what I think would be a cool book? I'd like to see a bunch of guys that are out, and it's like me when I was still.
Statute of limitations is over.
Statute of limitations is over. Yeah, and they don't have the kind of career where it could hurt them in any way, or like me. I waited to retire from law enforcement before I said or did a lot. Because I didn't want to be filtered. I'm not good at being filtered, so I'm unfiltered now. I joke with people. They're like, "Oh my God, if you're unfiltered now compared to before, I don't even want to know what comes out of your mouth." I'm like, yeah, I know. But but I would like to see a bunch of guys get together and write like short stories, and then put all the funny, hilarious short stories together into one book. I would title it like, Sea to Shore Shenanigans or something crazy like that. I think that would make a good.
I don't know that the civilian world is ready for that.
Oh, I know. They're not ready for a lot.
That's almost like vet TV,
Oh, don't even get me started on that one.
Veterans could read it.
Even
I totally can't handle
vet TV. I actually can't handle vet TV. I just am like, whoa, y'all are. I got some dark humor. I can handle dark humor, but y'all are really pushing the envelope on some of this. Like don't even.
There's a few of them that have pushed it, but it is hilarious. I watch it every now and then, but I really think like a book. You're right, a book like that would be awesome. But veterans could read it just like they watch Vet TV or other creators, and we totally get it. But the civilians would just.
They don't.
I don't think it would help. I don't think it would help the narrative.
Oh yeah,
of us being crazy and wild.
Honestly, and I tell people this all the time. I'm like, it really wouldn't change much from if a bunch of fraternity brothers at a college wrote a book. Think about it.
Well, I don't know about that.
I can tell you firsthand, they do some really stupid crap on college campuses. Because one of the areas I worked as a police officer was a college area. And I looked at some of the stuff these college kids would do. And I'm like, dude, even in the Navy, we wouldn't have thought of something that screwed up. What were you thinking? So I think it's just, it's sometimes it's tragic and it doesn't end well, obviously, for lots of people that do stupid stuff. And then, but then other times it's almost like a rite of passage, and it's a part of, growing up, and you could say, yeah, man, you got to hear this stupid thing I did one time, that prefrontal cortex is a little delayed.
Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely a rite of passage, and you gotta have your own crazy stories to go along with everybody else's.
Yep, for sure.
That would be definitely a good one to write. So I'm gonna move on to something that's a little bit more serious, and we'll kind of dive more into your book here. Don't really have a good transition for this one, but while you were down in now I'm having a brain fart.
Panama?
Was it Panama? Yeah. You had some things that happened to you.
Oh, that was the Azores.
Azores. Okay, that's right.
It was the Azores, yeah. My first duty station was the Azores right out of A school, and I was an E2.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it happened in the Azores. I'm not going to go into the specifics, but it was military sexual trauma, as it's referred to now. I don't know what they called it back in the day. I don't know if they had a
There
name
was
for
no
it.
name. You didn't talk about it.
I think it's unfortunately one of those things. Still to this day is definitely very brushed under the table, and something that most people don't want to talk about. And so, after reading the book, I was like, well, as long as you're comfortable with it. I mean, you wrote your book, so I definitely want to talk about it, because I've got another guest coming up here in the next few weeks, and it's going to be the topic of that. And it's a shame what happens. I see it repeatedly, that people don't get in trouble, and women sometimes get booted out, and they get labeled in certain ways and stuff like that. But in your story, in hindsight, all these years later, is there anything you would have done differently, or maybe share the story of what happened immediately after and things like that, how you might have handled it differently? Because I know you didn't really talk to anybody except for one person for many years about it.
27 years. Yep. One person, my best friend, the same one that saved my life and talked my sense into me the day I was going to hurt myself.
I kind of figured that's who it was.
Same person. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He's my rock.
A big part of your book.
He is a big part of
your life, obviously.
In my life, exactly. Yeah, he's that constant. He's just that constant rock friendship. That. I mean, we've had gaps in our lives where we didn't talk, and we can reconnect, and it's just like 5 minutes pass by. You know what I mean? It's just, we all have that one person in our life who just means a lot to us. And that's for him. For me, that's him. So
we all need some good friends and some good battle buddies, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And he was, sometimes
no matter what,
but he was that for you for many years.
Yeah. Cause I could trust him with things I couldn't trust anybody with, and as you know, from reading my book, trust is a big problem for me. So the fact that I found one person I could trust with anything, even my deepest, darkest secrets, with no judgment, and always encouraged me and always picked me up, that was what I needed in my life, because I didn't have it growing up. I didn't have it from family. I didn't have it from anybody. Just him. So that's why I call him my safety. He was my safe space. He was the one place I could go and I could say anything, and I felt safe. So anyway, so regarding the Azores, I was an E2. I arrived there in June, and it was not even 4 to 6 weeks. I've never been able to narrow down the date, but I've got it down to the month of July. So, and because I went through my medical records and I went through my personal records, and I started looking at what they called all the markers, and I was able to narrow it down to, okay, it was right around mid-July. So, when I first got there, it's such a tiny island. Everybody's friendly. Oh, come, we're going to a party and this, that, and the other thing. And when you're a female, you're used to being the minority, right? So to be invited to a party by a bunch of guys, these are brothers. This doesn't mean anything, right?
Yeah, I think the female population right now is something like 17% today.
And it was much lower back then.
So
yeah,
maybe 5% or so of the force.
Yeah, it was pretty low. Yeah. So, anyway, so I mean, I was just used to being invited to parties and by, males, females, everybody. We were just like it was a really small command and a really small island. So
Never been there, but I've heard that.
literally
I've heard by
11,
small, it's like really small.
11 miles by 7 miles. That's the whole island. Yeah.
So you could throw
it's just big enough to
other.
put it on one part of it to put an airstrip. So
that's the one where the planes literally land right over your head. Is that right?
Say again?
The airstrip, it's so small that the planes literally like fly just barely over the beach to land.
Yeah. Well, it's not beach, it's cliffs.
Cliffs. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it. And well, there's also Diego Garcia, which is equally small. So it could, both of them are about the same. So anyway, he had asked me, because he had a car, and if you had a car at that command, you were like everybody's best friend because nobody had cars. And he asked me and said, hey, you want to go for a tour of the island? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I spent one day with this guy taking a tour of the island, and everything was fine. And then we went to dinner. And then after that, he started like creeping me out, like, wanted to start dating. And I wasn't interested in dating. I wasn't even attracted to him. I just thought he was being nice. I was 19. I was naive, and he was an E6. And so I started avoiding him and trying to blow him off. Because again, I'm the new girl. I'm an E2. He's an E6. I'm trying to tread lightly. I don't want to be disrespectful to, how it is. And, an E6. So I just like started ignoring him and blowing him, just trying to avoid him. So like I said, it was about 4 to 6 weeks after I had arrived there. He had the quarterdeck watch at the barracks, and we had co-ed barracks where if you think of like a motel room, I could have, guys living across the hall. It would be one room with 2 girls assigned to it, share a bathroom, and then another room with 2 girls assigned to it. Right. And that's how they all were. But then right across the hall, you could have guys. It wasn't like the guys were upstairs and the girls were downstairs. It wasn't like that. So, and everybody had to cover the watch. So he was on watch. I can't remember. I think it was the 8 to midnight watch, because they were 4-hour watches. And after a certain hour, they had to log in, who came and went. After a certain hour, you could only come and go from the main entrance of the building. But during the daytime hours, it was a really long, skinny building. You could come and go from the side entrances, but after a certain hour, after dark, then you had to come and go through the main entrance. So he had the watch. I come in. It was a Friday night. I was exhausted. I had left the club earlier than like I went on another night, because I was just tired. And so I walked back to the barracks, and I walked in, and he made some smart ass comment, and I just kind of pretended I didn't hear him, and I kept on going. I went to my room, went to bed, and I had just started falling asleep, like, that twilight, where you're not in a deep sleep, but you're not awake either. And I had a roommate that was assigned to the room, but she was never there because she had a boyfriend that lived off base, and everybody knew that. So it was like I had the room to myself, even though somebody else was assigned to it with me. So, and as anybody who had the watch had master keys to the whole building. So he had the master key. So I went into my room. I was I was falling asleep in that area, and I heard somebody come in. Every once in a blue moon, she would come in. Either they had a fight or she needed something or whatever. So when I heard the door open, I just assumed it was her, and it was dark. All you could see was just a little bit of light in the room coming in from like street lights outside through the window. So, the best I could see was like a silhouette. And just as I went to say, hey, what are you doing? Because she was, I thought it was she, whoever it was like standing right next to my bed. And if it was her, she would normally walk by. And just as I went to say, hey, what are you doing? I felt the hand go over my mouth and my nose, and I couldn't breathe. And he basically, just told me to be quiet and enjoy it. And he had me pinned down with all of his body weight. And I, the adult me would have fought like there's no tomorrow, right? The 19-year-old me from a small town, really naive, had never processed something like this going through my head, right? I came from a long line of Navy, a long line of veterans. In a million years, I never dreamed something like that could happen. You didn't hear about it. Nobody talked about it. It just it was just nothing that ever even came up with anybody. So I froze. I mean, I panicked, and my mind kind of just checked out and went to another place. It's really hard to explain, because it was a case of I couldn't breathe. His hand went from my nose and my mouth to around my neck. So I was legitimately in fear, right, for my life. And I remember physically trying to resist, but being unable to. And then when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to fight my way out of it, I think it was like I just mentally went somewhere else. And I can honestly tell you, I don't remember much. I've never have remembered much. I can't remember the son of a bitch's name. First name only. Remember what he looks like. Can't remember the incident in detail. Can't remember his last name. And trust me, at one point in time, I knew his last name very well. But that's one of the things that have been suppressed that I have not been able to recover. I wish I could, because with the internet now, I'd have a heyday.
I bet.
So, yeah. So anyway.
And I wouldn't blame you one bit for doing it.
No, I mean, I've had people offer to try to help me find him. And I found a picture, and I zoomed in and I've got it. But, we put it out there on a couple sites and nobody knows him. And what's really weird is the few people that I have remembered their names that were there at the time that would maybe remember his name, they're all dead. They've all died of either cancer or just different things.
That's a crazy coincidence.
And they're not, they died at young ages. Yeah, so they weren't even, it is. It's like, and I just keep, and every now and then I'll go on a mission, like I'll start digging. It's like, I feel like I'm never really going to be at peace until I hunt this son of a bitch down. Right. I'd love to remember his last name. It'd make things a lot easier. But anyway, all I've got is I do have a picture, and I have a first name, and he was in Airedale, and he was in E6 at the time. And I think he was from the New York area, but that's all I can remember.
Well, that definitely doesn't help narrow anybody down.
Oh yeah, no, I mean,
New York area.
Yeah, dark hair, very. I think it was maybe a Hispanic. He was either biracial or Hispanic race. I'm not really sure. But he had dark features, bushy mustache. So anyway, when it was over, he told me that it would be best to keep my mouth shut and not tell anybody about it, because girls that like to talk don't help themselves out, and it would probably, I would be labeled a troublemaker, and I wouldn't go anywhere, and blah blah blah. And you did hear about things like that. You did hear about girls that would complain about, so-and-so is bothering me or whatever, and then they were labeled troublemakers. So, and he says, nobody's going to believe an E2 over an E6, because you think somebody's going to believe you over me? And I believed him. And I had left a dysfunctional family, which you know about in the book. And it was like, the Navy was my dream. It's what I always wanted to do. That was my ticket out of my bad background to see the world and do something with my life. So I just I remember saying to myself, it was a bad dream. This never happened. I remember taking a shower. I remember vomiting. And I remember telling myself this was a bad dream and it just never happened. And I went to bed, and when I woke up the next day, it was as if I convinced myself, nope, that didn't happen. It was total denial. It was a bad dream. And I never told anybody. And it wasn't until Panama when my person, Zach, and I got into an argument, and because I was acting a little crazy, right? And that was the beginning of the PTSD beginning to manifest. I just didn't, back then we didn't even have anything called PTSD, right? That was kind of the beginning of the consequences of not properly dealing with what happened. And we got into a fight, and he said, like, what the hell is wrong with you? Because it was a trust thing. And I just said, I was raped, damn it. And I said, and we're never going to talk about it. You understand me? Don't you tell anybody. And I think I just shocked him when I said it. And he was just, because he was an E.
Well, you probably did. Yeah.
Yeah. We were both E4s. we were both young, and we were we were 20, maybe going on 21. It was either 90 or 91. So it would have been about a year and a half later. I said, and we're never going to talk about it. I don't ever want to bring it up again. You better not tell anybody. And he was like, okay. And that was it. And it never came up again until 2017, when obviously many other things through my life had happened. And then it was like, I tell people, when I hit rock bottom in 2017, that day that I made that phone call, an incident occurred, and it was like somebody took C4 and put it on my little black box of traumas that I had buried in the back of my head, where the rape was and all the traumatic calls I'd been to and everything I'd seen in my career. Everything just kept getting stuffed into that little black box that, we don't touch it, we don't open it, we leave it alone. And when that incident on June 1st, 2017 happened, it was like literally someone took C4, put it to the freaking black box, blew it up, and all of my traumas came flying out, and I wasn't sleeping. I couldn't get the images out of my head. It was like I was reliving all those years 24/7. It was horrible. I've never experienced depression, I was always credited as, oh my God, you're so strong, you're so resilient, you've been through so much. And I just, my mom raised me. You pick your bootstraps up and you keep going. And that's what I always did. And then one day I just couldn't do it anymore. I broke.
Yeah, I think we all, in some ways, have that box, like you say, and just keep stuffing stuff in there. And eventually, no matter what's in your past, something is going to happen. I know I've been there. You've been there. Like, everybody's been there. So what would you say to somebody who feels like, maybe that's just happened, their box has now exploded, or they just keep packing stuff in there? What's your advice to them to deal with it?
Talk. Either talk to your brothers or your sisters. Okay. Talk. Don't pretend that, don't believe the inner voices that you're weak, or that, this is my job and this is what I signed up for. Or don't buy into that bullshit, because here's what I've learned in the research that I've done. Now, trust me, by now I've done a lot of research. The difference between our current generations and the old ones, the World War I and World War II vets, back then, and I heard this straight from a World War II veteran. So, and it makes perfect sense to me. And it's ironic. Before I heard it from the World War II veteran, I theorized the exact same thing in my book, which is kind of funny because my grandpa was a World War II veteran. So I kind of, I have that history. But I had this thing where, okay, back in the World War I, World War II days, and police officers and firefighters, they had their own bars. It was a brotherhood, and they drank together. They broke bread together. Their families had barbecues with each other. And the guys, back in the old days, it was guys, would go off to the side and they would talk to each other because they could relate to each other, right? They didn't talk to their wives because they didn't want their wives to know the things they'd seen or the things they'd done. They were afraid of either A, what they would think of them, or B, pass their pain on to them, right? So they did it together. Then this World War II veteran comes along at a conference I was at and said, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I don't know what PTSD is. We didn't have that back in my days. Some guys got shell shock, which was kind of an old version of it. He says, but the difference between then and now, he said, is nowadays you go off to war, you get on a plane and you go straight home, right? Back then, you went to war, you got bandaged up if it wasn't bad enough, and you went back out to war, right? But they commuted by ships. They went from Europe and Japan. A lot of them were brought over on those huge ships, and there'd be thousands of men. And there was a 1 or 2 week transit across the Atlantic or the Pacific. And that time that they were in transit, they were, in essence, doing group therapy. They were talking to each other. They were sharing stories. And then they came home and they stayed in touch with each other over the years. They kept those relationships going to the day my grandfather's best friend died. They were there. They were in their 80s, and they were at war, in the Pacific together. So the difference between then and now is now, you're afraid your buddies are going to make, oh, come on, don't be weak. Don't be a this, don't be a that, or this is what you do. Hey man, this is what war is about. That's fine. That's true. That's not wrong, but it doesn't mean you got to just like take it and stuff it and not deal with it. You got to figure out a way to deal with it. And there are awesome retreats now that are owned and operated by veterans that are all nonprofit, doesn't cost anything. And, that's what we'll talk about in a little bit, I'm sure, but that's on one, that resource page is on my website. All these places that people don't know about that you can go and you can finally talk to your brothers and sisters. And there's these, everything from equine therapy, service dogs, there's this one cool task. I can't wait to do it when my Charlotte gets better because I'm supposed to go. It's in South Dakota, Sacred Mountain Retreat. But they take the, help me out. Pardon my TBI. The things that go in, the railroads in place, the spikes,
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about, right? There's a word for it. I'm drawing a blank. Railroad spikes.
Yeah, just railroad spikes.
Yeah, railroad spikes. But they take them and they heat them and they give them this big old freaking hammer, right? And there's a guy that guides them through it. It's like an art class, but you're beating the shit out of this, spike, and you can make it into anything you want. Most of the guys turn them into cool knives, right? Because guys like knives. I'm like, no,
it already kind of has the shape.
Yeah. I'm like, well, of course, leave it to me. I'm going to be like the non-creative, complicated one. I want an anchor. So I want to beat mine into an anchor. They said anything you want to create, the guy that heads the class will, and while you're doing this, you're talking to each other and you're telling stories, and it's like you're beating your frustrations out on this freaking iron, or steel or whatever it's made of. But so I heard that was really, really good. So there's all these really cool, cathartic and therapeutic places and activities, from hunting and outdoors trips and hiking and just so much out there that's really cool and good for you. But you're doing it with your brethren, people that you can talk to, that you can relate to, not some psychologist who, like, the scariest thing she's ever seen was, I don't know, a domestic violence victim that had a black eye, not diminishing that, but we all know as veterans and cops, we can't go into regular psychologists if they don't specialize in that area, because the things that we tell them, they can't handle it. I've seen it. They go, oh, I'm going to refer you to this person over here, because they just all of a sudden, it's like you're giving them PTSD. You know what I mean? Just from telling your stories.
Yeah, I haven't seen too many people, but I had a guy I went to a couple of times, and I was like, there was like some sort of disconnect. I couldn't figure it out. I knew he was a civilian, and I kind of figured that was part of
not
it
a good
somehow.
Fit. Yeah, they don't get it.
The lady I see now, she's married to a guy, to a military member, but she's a civilian, but she's way better than what he is. So I'm happy with the person I'm seeing. But back to the World War II guy, that was really early in your book, but I had totally forgotten about that when I was kind of coming up with the questions. What I've always thought was unique is World War II in Korea, there was pretty well established front lines. You could be in a unit, be on the front lines for a couple of weeks, maybe a month, whatever, and then you could come back to the relative safety way behind lines for a couple of weeks while another unit rotates forward. In Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan, we don't have that. You've got a population around you where everybody's a potential threat. You don't know who these people are. Every time you step out of a bunker, there's a threat around you. Not even just anywhere you go on base. So you never really decompress from that. And then we come home.
And the deployments are longer.
Yeah, the deployments are
longer. And the rotations are shorter.
When I was in, it was I hadn't even got to Japan yet when I found out I was going to be deployed to a prison camp. I already knew where I was going, and I knew approximately when we were leaving, where we were doing pre-deployment training at. And when you come back from those, I don't know how the other branches are, but the Air Force will give you like 2 weeks. You come back, you land, that next day you come back in process to the unit for a day, 2 days, whatever paperwork you need to do to process back in, and then they give you like 2 weeks off. Mm-hmm. Well, what do most people do? They just go home and they sit on the couch. And how are you dealing with anything?
You're not.
You're in the same household with your kids.
You're isolated. That's the worst thing you can do. You're isolated.
Yeah, and I've thought for a long time, like the way we do that is wrong. I don't understand why we can't set up, and luckily right now we don't have that many people to do that with. But those that come back from deployment, should probably, for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, be at a separate base, even if they're stateside, be at a separate base. You do pre-deployment training. Why not post-deployment training? Bring them back, have a deployment-like schedule for the first week, and then wean that schedule back to your normal 9-to-5 job, whatever kind of schedule you'll have back at your home station. That way you're around all the people you were deployed with the whole time, have a mission, have classes every day, kind of slowly decompress that throughout your schedule.
Debrief.
And the people you're around and debrief for 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then you come home. At least if you're stateside and you're doing that, you still have FaceTime with your family. Your family finally can breathe a little bit that
they know you're safe.
They're home.
Yes.
They're on American soil. Yeah, it's all good.
Exactly.
And it's like, I don't understand what is so difficult about that.
No,
we have the facility.
Not. And that's because we've got leadership that, just like MST, I hate the word victim, survivors, we'll call it survivors. Okay. I'm going to choose my words very carefully because I have a lot of respect for this person. He retired very, very, very high in the ranks. And I ran my book by him before I published because I wanted to make sure that I didn't embarrass, most importantly, the spec war community. Because, as you know, in my book, in my world, SEALs walk on water. I don't care how big of an asshole they are. I don't care how big of a freaking arrogant they might be. And I'm not saying that they are, but some, just like everybody, can be.
Of course,
right? Yeah. But at the end of the day, I credit the spec war community with my success in life, right? In giving me the mental fortitude that I needed to get where I am. That never quit mentality. So it was really important to me that I didn't write anything in my book that would embarrass them in any way, like jumping out of 2-story windows with their faces on fire.
No, it's just another day.
Because that's just funny. But I'm like, is this okay to say? I don't want to embarrass anybody. And he's like, no, man, that's the kind of crazy crap that did happen. He goes, now you understand that doesn't happen much anymore. And I go, yeah, I know. I've been around the new guys. They're much more formal, but the old guys, they're way more fun, But anyway, so we talked about it. And, from his perspective as a leader, sadly, a lot of victims are not believed still. And that is, for me, and I was just having this conversation today, for me, that is a very, very, very complicated, difficult thing for me. And that's why I tell everybody, I'm like, please do not put the Me Too on me. Please do not put the hashtag on me. I don't want to be part of it. I don't associate with it. I don't blame the military for what happened to me. I blame one bad person, right? What people need to understand is 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime. And the statistic remains, it's 1 in 4 women in the in the military, 1 in 4 in college, 1 in 4 in civilian life. It is statistically 25% of women, regardless of where they go, are going to be a sexual victim. That is unfortunate, but those are the numbers. So when you look at that statistic, that means, and a lot of true victims are like me. They don't report it because they are afraid no one's going to believe them. They are afraid that they're going to have to tell their story. And trust me, I've told my story lots of times now. And you saw how many pauses I took. I still kind of struggle telling it, but I tell it because it's important, right? Initially, as you know, in my book, I couldn't even utter the words. It was a poster that I pointed at to get the lady at the VA to understand why I was trying to get some help, right? Because I couldn't even say it. It's when you're a real victim, it's hard to talk about. The liars right out of the gate, because they're telling it like they just went to a story, like as if they just went to the grocery store. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
It's the way they deliver the story. Right off the bat if they're telling the truth or not. Okay. Now, is that 100%? No, nothing is 100%, but that's pretty common. And as a police officer for 20 years, I got so jaded because I got lied to so many times by women who are lying about being victims of sexual assault that I immediately, when responding to those calls, I started looking for their motive. Okay, why are they lying? Is it a child custody battle? Is it my ex-boyfriend, is, leaving me? Where's the motive? Because if I can find the motive, I can probably figure out that they're lying and I can find the holes in the story. I didn't want to traumatize them because what if they're telling the truth? And I come right out of the gate with, now, come on, really? Did that really happen to you? If they're telling the truth, you don't want to do that because then they are going to completely shut down and you're done, right? And you've done justice for no one. So
yeah, there's no help for them at that point. Once they shut down.
No, exactly. So, but I mean, even as a true victim myself and having not ever dealt with it as a police officer, even I got jaded. Like, really, come on, why are you lying? In my mind, I'm asking, why are they lying? And then there were times where I was convinced they were lying, but I still did my job and I still kept asking the questions. And then all of a sudden, as I'm asking the questions, they're answering the questions in a way that a person who's telling the truth would answer them. Somebody who's lying, you ask certain questions and they don't know how to answer them. Somebody who's telling the truth will know exactly how to answer that question. And then you'll wait.
They've already rehearsed it in their mind.
Because it actually happened.
Oh, no, I was thinking liars. Like liars have rehearsed things.
No, liars have rehearsed a script.
Yeah.
When you ask them a question that's off script, that's unusual, they don't know the answer. But if it was a real victim, they would know the answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what I would do in my interviews is I would, get them to tell me the story. Okay, da-da-da-da. Okay, I'm like, right, let's fill in some details. Then I would start asking more detailed questions, things that they wouldn't have thought of rehearsing. And then that's when you can start usually breaking their story down and figure out if they're telling the truth or a lie. Well, for me, and I hate to bring it up because it's politics, but it's not politics. The Kavanaugh case, Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh. Let me preface it with, no, I don't believe her. Okay. But that's neither here nor there. For me, that entire ordeal was extremely difficult because of the things I heard people say. Oh, well, if she was a real victim, she wouldn't have waited so long. If she was a real victim, she reported it back then. If she was a real victim, this. If she was a real victim, that. Those were things that I myself related to. And I'm like, well, this is why people don't tell. Because I waited 27 years to report it.
Exactly.
Does that mean I'm lying? No. It's because I've spent 27 years in denial trying to pretend it didn't happen. And then
there's pain, there's stigma, there's all these different emotions that come up. Like,
you feel damaged, you feel broken. What are people going to think of me? I mean, oh my God, it's so many just awful. And then if you do report it, I'm going to be put under the spotlight of, well, why are you lying? And, what have you got to gain from this? And it's like being raped all over again, and then I've sat in courtrooms where true victims have had to testify in courtrooms and seen what they go through by defense attorneys. And I want to rip all their faces off because it's like, dude, I get that you're defending your client, but there is no need to be so horrible while you're doing it. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I could never be a defense attorney. That's for damn sure. No. But anyway, the point is it's no different than like what's going on in the law enforcement communities where, it seems like cops are guilty until proven innocent nowadays, with everything that's going on in the world. Can we just give everyone the benefit of the doubt and do an investigation and then draw a conclusion? I mean, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with waiting for the science or the expert, because they've got people who can interview victims that are skilled, trained interviewers and know how to tell if someone's telling the truth or not. Why can't we just wait and see what the experts say and then go from there instead of everybody just jumping to conclusions on whether or not somebody's lying or telling the truth?
Yeah, we have a system in place. Let the system kind of play out. A lot of times when those things happen, especially for law enforcement, when it's a shooting or something like that, there's a lot of feelings on both sides of things. And I always feel like stuck in the middle. Having some law enforcement experience, knowing the use of force model and stuff. And it's like, wait a minute, pump the brakes. There is two stories, and the truth is somewhere in the middle.
And there's also perceptions. So people say, well, that's not what happened. I've been to robberies and interviewed 21 people, and 21 people saw something different. He was black. No, he was Hispanic. He had a black shirt. No, he had a blue shirt. He had this. And it's like, 21 people saw the exact same incident, but no two stories match because everybody has their own perception. So you have to take all of that, put it together, and do a full-blown investigation, right? Or in shootings, you got to wait for the trajectory and the forensic evidence to play out. Well, my beef with the military, and I could be wrong, and I hope I am wrong, is it's my understanding in the old days, if I had come out, if I had said something, I would have had people who had no criminal investigative experience whatsoever looking into my situation. Is that the people you really want doing an investigation on something as sensitive as that?
Definitely not.
No.
I don't think there would have been anybody back in the day.
No, there wasn't. And I mean, I don't even know if there is today. It's my understanding in some places, chain of commands and commanders and people that their job is to be relieving the troops, not doing felony and criminal investigations. I think our victims of sexual trauma in the military need to be treated the exact same way victims of sexual trauma in the civilian world are. They deserve a especially trained, skilled investigator who specializes in those types of crimes. And if they were to, because here's the thing, in the Navy, if you commit a felony, NCIS investigates it, or in the Army, it's CID. They need special investigators, like a special victims unit, just for those allegations. They need to be doing the investigations, and the command needs to take a neutral stand and stay out of it. In the real world, we would charge somebody with tampering with a witness. If I made an allegation against someone and then somebody comes to me and says, hey, you better drop these charges or you better let this go, or XYZ, that would be tampering with a witness. That would be a felony crime, and they could get arrested for that. In the military, again, I was in a long time ago. I don't know how things are changed. So I'm not, anybody listening out there, I'm not saying it's still like this. The truth is I don't know. And I hope it's not. But I think that they need to be special victims units, and commands need to stay out of it and let them do their jobs and just separate the parties and let it play out just like it would in the civilian world.
Yeah. I don't know too much exactly what goes on in that anymore. I don't know, Air Force who investigates it. I don't know. It's probably Air Force Office of Special Investigators, but I do know they have what do they call it? SARC office, Sexual Assault Response Coordinator or something. That's more of a victim's advocate where they can reach out to them, kind of walk them through the process. But
if the female is lying, and let me just say female, if the person making the allegations is proven to lie, then they need to be held accountable.
Oh, totally agree.
Yeah. Because I know guys that have been falsely accused, and that's not okay either. So
I think that's, because as I reflect back, because I was a supervisor as well, I had female troops, and I'm very thankful that I had supervisors above me who did the right thing, and they pulled me to the side and said, look, you're a supervisor, you have female troops. Under no circumstances do you go to the dormitory and step foot in that door unless you have the first sergeant or another NCO with you. And
I would say unless you have a female with you.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. One of them better be a female.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I was told.
Yeah.
They're like, if you need to go talk to your troop, you go knock on that door. You do not step in. There's security cameras in the hallway. That's your proof right there that you didn't do nothing.
Exactly.
So same thing with counseling in offices. You open up the door. If you have to have a closed room session, then you have a female in the room, and you do it in the same room with the first sergeant or something, right? Where you've got other witnesses around, you've got a female in there. And I'm very, very thankful that I had those people that kind of looked out for it. The culture had changed a little bit where people were like, look, we know this happens, but this protects you as the guy against those false accusations.
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
Because
totally
I had a troop that, as I look back, she wasn't a bad troop, but some things happened mental health wise with her that now I look back on it and I'm like, I wonder if there was a military sexual trauma that occurred and she never had the courage to come tell anybody. While her and I got along all right, I'm sick to my stomach that I wasn't a good enough supervisor for her to have the guts to come tell me. Because I would
Sometimes
have
it's not
wanted to go
guts.
fight. Well, I
You
mean,
know,
yeah, whatever.
It's just they are having an internal. This was me having an internal struggle on accepting the fact that it happened, accepting the fact that it happened. A lot of times,
leader,
as a victim, you don't want to deal with it. You just want to. Denial's easier, not right, but it's easier. But in the long run, it's not good. Obviously.
Yeah. As I just reflect back, though, I mean, I just kind of felt like, wow. I feel like I got along well with everybody. I would have hoped that somebody would have felt comfortable enough to come to me so we could go take care of this the right way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I also think that, you know, when you say 1 in 4, I've seen the same thing. I've seen the same thing about the VA too, that 1 in 4 women that go to the VA get sexually harassed before they even enter the door.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I have never had anything like that happen to me, but I will tell you this much. I'm going to piss off some women when I say this. The older generation, and I mean the Vietnam, the guys, the older generation. Hey, sweetie. Hey, honey, is not frickin' sexual harassment. That is just an old generational choice of words. Stop with the bullshit. Stop with the feministic, crap, because you're not helping our cause, right?
Yeah, I've even had that from old ladies.
I mean, he sexually harassed me, and I'm like, well, what did he do? He called me sweetie, and I'm like, oh, good Lord, are you serious? I'm like, that is not sexual harassment. He's 70 years old. I mean, he probably can't remember your name. I call everybody honey and sweetie because I can't remember names, right?
I can't remember shit.
Yeah, I'm like, so it's like, so some of the sexual harassment at the VA, I'm like, I don't know about that. I have never had a problem. And I'm not defending the VA because I know shitty shit does happen sometimes at some locations.
Oh, it happens.
I know it does.
To some degree, for sure.
I'm lucky where I live. I got a great one. I got no complaints. But I've talked to other females that have gone to the exact same one that I've gone to, and they're upset over really petty crap. And like, well, I'm an MST survivor. They should know better. I'm like, I'm an MST survivor, and I can take it for what it is. An elderly man who is like in his generation, that is perfectly acceptable. And you need to just let that shit go.
Around with a big old sign or necklace on that says MST survivor. Like,
right. Like how's he supposed to know?
No, yeah.
Yeah. And even if he did know, he still wouldn't know he was being offensive. Let's say you did have the sign, this is MST. That generation of old Vietnam, Korea, World War II, God bless them, not that many left, but you know what I'm talking about. The older generation, that is their generation. My grandpa was one of them. Oh my God, if my grandpa were alive today, he'd be in jail. Like, he would.
Yeah.
He'd be like, hey, honey, you got a nice rack. That was my grandpa.
And
people would laugh, and he got away with it.
I've seen a World War II guy get away with that. Yeah, I'm involved with the Honor Flight program.
Oh,
and
so cool.
I think one of the first 2 trips, probably the first 1 or 2 trips I was on, we're eating lunch next to the buses behind the Lincoln Memorial and monument there. And there was only a couple of guys left. Everybody else and their guardians had kind of walked off, but we had a politician from our area come out and meet some people. Well, there's not that many guys left, so they're shaking hands and talking and stuff like that. And everybody kind of gets done with lunch, and everybody kind of walks towards the front of the building and go to the reflecting pond and everything. And she's way ahead with her entourage. She's got her staff members who are on their cell phones 24/7. And he made some comments about our elected official, about her that made my jaw drop. And another one of the staff members, volunteers, him and I just looked at each other like, wow, I cannot believe he just said that. And it was about her backside. And it was just like,
did she hear it?
Wow, I'm pretty sure she did. I think she was close enough to have heard it. But it was just like, wow, you got
it. Look,
no filter.
No filter at all. None. And I joke all the time. I'm like, dude, the best thing. They're like, so how's retirement? I'm like, great. I said, I'm unleashed. I have no filter at all anymore.
I can say whatever I want.
I can say whatever I want. Yeah. So,
Wow.
but and so I am very, very forgiving of the older generation because I have so much respect for them and I know they don't mean any harm. And I think that's what people really need to look at is what is the intent? Was the intent to demean you? Was the intent to humiliate you? Was the intent to insult you? Well, if there was a derogatory intent there, then by all means, you have a right to be upset. But if they're just, an old guy having a good day and he's trying to flirt with you, dude, get over it. Just I pat him on the shoulder and give him a hug and give him a little thrill for the day. I don't give a shit, and I am an MST survivor. So I think that's why I tell people all the time, I'm like, look, please don't put the hashtag on me. I don't want to be part of the Me Too because I'm able to look at both sides of the fence,
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of differences between generations. This where we're at in 2021 right now is just totally different than the way people talk to each other in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever.
Here's a question. Who do you think was having more fun? What generation do you think was having more fun?
That's a good one. I've always considered myself a history fan, and I got a funny feeling they had a lot of fun in the 60s.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe into the 70s.
The hippies. I don't know. No, I think the 50s would have been really cool. I've always kind of like dug the 50s, because that's the World War II veterans after they came back and, and the poodle skirts and all that. I don't know.
A lot of prosperity, a lot of changes.
There was no politically correct. If you didn't like somebody or something that they said, you kept on going. It was a free country. If
you had a problem with somebody, you got a couple of fists to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. Guys can have a fight and then shake hands afterwards. Not anymore. Good Lord, everything offends everybody.
Yeah, nowadays kids don't even finish fights anymore.
Or somebody brings a gun or a weapon, or or they got their homies with them with 4 people standing behind them. Don't even know.
Yeah. That's different things for different generations. But speaking of different generations, let's want to talk to you about another part of your book that I told you before we started recording that really hit me because the similarities are insane.
Yeah, so she's going to stay in the room for a moment, but she doesn't want to come on camera, which is fine. And I know where you're going with this, so she's just going to hang for a minute because it's about her. So go ahead.
That it is. As I was reading through the book, and you have one child, you have a daughter who's a teenager now. I'm sure that's quite interesting. But when she was born at 29 weeks and 3 pounds. Is that right?
That's right.
And that's where things, as I was reading the book, I was like, holy shit, that is hit so close to home to me because my youngest was born at 29 weeks and he was 3 pounds, 3 ounces. And now he is a little fireball of energy.
How old is he now?
He'll be 9 this winter. So he is like I said, a fireball of energy, never stops, super creative, funny. I keep telling him he needs to be a comedian. Like that's his calling in life. And he always shuts it down. Like, nope, I don't want to be a comedian. And I'm like, but you don't understand how funny you are. It's not that he tells jokes. It's just, the way he says things and the way he acts in life. But, I think that's, what you went through is what a lot of people go through, kids, medical issues or premature birth or all kinds of different things. And you did all this as a single mother. So just want to get your take on how you made it through all that. How'd you made it through all that preemie process and how do you get through being a single mother? Because I know there's a lot of veterans out there that are playing that single mother, single father role.
Well, it kind of depends on which part. Like the part while she was in the hospital, God, plain and simple. I, as you know, had a beef with God for a really long time. And the day she was born, I made a deal with God. And I said, God, if you spare her, I'll change my life. I swear. And I did. And I prayed a lot. And I had a very close friend who was a Catholic nun. She was actually in the OR with me when, my daughter was born. And
I was going to say, it's quite ironic that that moment leads you to God. And Sister Jean was her name, right?
Yep.
And she was there. She was the first one to be able to get to you.
Yep, exactly. And she was the only one even close. So it's one of those things where, everybody gets put in a place for a reason. And I was, of course, upset my mom wasn't going to make it in time. It was rush hour traffic and none of my close friends. And I called her and she's like, honey, I'm a block away. I'll be right there. So she was in the OR when my daughter was born. And of course, we were very, very close. And so there was a lot of prayers. It just was like, well, as being a preemie parent, it's like you literally live minute to minute, and more overcome one medical hurdle, and then the doctors tell you about the next one. And so I look back now, and I don't know how I did it as a single mom, other than I cried a lot, I prayed a lot. My mom had a stillborn before me. She couldn't handle it. She couldn't even go to the hospital. I was really, like, as far as the hospital goes, I was really on my own. And I just did. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, like, I felt like if she's fighting for her life, I'm going to fight for her too. So I was a very, very involved mom. I was there every single day, except for 5 days when I got a cold and they wouldn't let me come visit her. And I was just like cried for 5 days with a head cold. I mean, stupid head cold. And I couldn't even go visit her, and it was Thanksgiving. I'll never forget it. And, we were getting invited places for Thanksgiving dinner, and I'm just like, I couldn't even get off the couch. I mean, I was just like so sad. I wanted to see her so bad, but, and then, finally she got to come home, and then it was just the joy of finally having her home.
All of the medical stuff. And all
Yeah, she came home. She came home, and we joked about it because she came home on a heart and apnea monitor with the thing, and if she stopped breathing or whatever. So, like, I joked, and I'm like, yeah, I got to be anywhere there's an outlet. My kid has to stay plugged into the wall. But
yeah, I kind of chuckled at that part too, because my son had that little thing that would just go right across the chest.
Yep.
And I think he only had his for like 2 months, something like that.
That's about what she had hers for too. Yeah.
Such
and the false alarms. I know. And it was every time she bared down to poop, that was what set the alarm off. So it was like my kid literally set off alarms when she had a dirty diaper. It's like, woohoo, dirty diaper, let's go. Because I mean, at first you freak every time the alarm goes off. And then after a while you start to figure the routine, and you're like, oh no, it's about that time. Gotta go change the diaper. But I mean, it's just you literally just take it one day at a time, and you remember the doctor's appointments. I mean, that's all you do for the first 2 years, it feels like, is go to doctor's appointments and monitoring and, developmental progress and milestones. And there was a program we're in Florida, and there's a program called Part C. And they were good. They sent occupational physical therapists into the house to do therapy and all that stuff with her. So, what?
Your face is covered. Move your head.
Oh, she's telling me to stand up straight.
Have good posture.
Sorry. So what happens when you're a teenager? And so she is going to be very soon 16.
Woo!
And 5'7".
Woo!
And a size 11 shoe for ladies.
Not woo.
Not woo, because it's hard to find shoes.
You know what? Hey, I feel that. I have wide feet, and it's hard to find wide feet. So I can relate a little bit.
Especially looking.
Yeah, I mean, she's been on swim teams. She's played volleyball. She didn't have it easy in the beginning, and back then we didn't have support groups. I think that's the one thing I would have given anything for a preemie support group, because we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have social media. That all came out shortly after. I think when she was a toddler is about the time that hit. And but at the time, like everybody was always calling, wanting an update. So I would send out daily email. How people will blog on Facebook or whatever now. I sent out daily emails. It was like a big group email. Okay, here's what we did today. And that was, now that I think about it, that was probably really cathartic as well, because again, writing, and not only did I give them medical updates, but it was also, able to pour my feelings out and my fears. And I had a couple people who had premature babies or who had been preemies themselves way back in the day when preemies didn't survive, right? Calling me and telling me that it was going to be okay. This is tough, but it's going to be okay. So, I mean, I just had a really good tribe is the best I can say.
Medical programs.
Yeah.
Gotten a lot of farther.
Yeah, they made a lot of improvements. I've got what is he, second, third cousin, something like that. He's a few years older than me. And I know back when he was born, probably around 1980, there wasn't a lot of those things. And he really defied some odds.
Yeah.
And-
Well, March of Dimes is to thank for it, because March of Dimes, after they cured polio, found the cure for polio, they are widely credited with the advancements that have been made in the neonatal, within treatments and stuff that premature babies go through. So
I did not know that.
Oh yeah, March of Dimes is who's responsible for dramatically increasing the survivability of premature babies. So yeah, I'm a big believer in them. I love what they do.
That's awesome, because it's crazy, all of the sophisticated equipment and all the things that they can do with a child that's only 3 pounds, and most babies and it's
your micro
it's
preemies are surviving now. 24-week babies. I mean,
22.
Yeah, is the record 22
Wow.
now? My daughter, she follows this stuff.
I wanted to go to the March for Pro.
She wants to go to March for Life. We're big pro life people. So
that's incredible.
So she marches it.
That's a tiny baby, and I just remember, now that my kid's almost 9, all the touch and go moments. And I was honestly working most of the time, so my wife was the one up there every day. I'd get up there every other day if I could, because I had a 2-year-old as well, taking care of him, and it's kind of a blur. All of that process is a blur, but you gotta. It's amazing how much advancement there is. But since she's right there next to you, I'm just gonna ask you.
She just left.
Oh, she just left. Okay.
Yeah, you got a question?
Okay. No, I was gonna ask you a question.
She walked back in. She heard me. So go ahead.
Do you find that she is an extraordinarily scrappy, stubborn child? Because I totally find that about my son.
What?
He is the most stubborn child I've ever met.
What?
He wants to know. I swear I did
Okay.
not prompt this question, by the way.
Okay.
He wants to know if you're an extraordinarily scrappy, stubborn child, because his son is.
I don't think scrappy would be the good word for it, but I would definitely go with stubborn. I definitely get that from both of my parents.
No, you don't. You get it from being a preemie. He's got it. I
Well,
forgot
that's
about
true,
this because
yeah.
your doctor told me this when she was little. I'm so glad you brought that up. I'd forgotten that. They say preemies they are very strong-willed and they are very hard-headed
Oh yeah, I
because
refuse.
it's a survival skill.
Yeah.
Like, to be quite honest, like a couple of my teachers at school, they are not very fond of me because I will call out bullcrap in class, like, hey, that wasn't on the test. And they'll be like, yes, it was. And I was like, no, page this and this. No, it wasn't. And they'll be like, and I'm like, well, too bad. I still have it in this class, so that's not my problem.
Yeah, she'll call people out. She don't have a problem with it.
No,
now
I
she's
don't
respectful.
Yeah,
She
of
does it
course.
respectfully, but she's
Yeah.
not afraid to call
No.
BS out. So
It's
Yeah,
good to
but
know.
people
I should
sit there and
take
be like,
note of that
"Listen
to
to
know what
something."
the future holds for
I'm like,
my.
all right, I'll speak
oh
up.
man, let me tell you, it's these teenage years. Whew, it's an adventure.
I'm good.
I bet my kids are literally right around the corner from it. I just wish time would slow down on that. But
What happened?
so last thing I want to talk to you about. I don't know if he is still in the room here. I'm assuming it's a he. I don't think he really said in the book. Is Saint there?
He is. Yeah, I was
Passed
gonna
out?
say I know he is. He never leaves my side. He just blended in with the dark carpeting. You want to see him?
Oh, no, I figured he was probably still in the room there. Yeah, if he's awake, we put him up on
You
camera.
see?
We have first dog on camera.
There you go.
There's the star of the last couple chapters of the book right there.
He's like, I don't like cameras. He's camera shy.
Yeah, of course.
There you go. There we go. If Mama scratches him, he's all happy about it.
It's all good now.
Boy. Is you my good boy? Or is you my good boy?
You had some, great. I think it was a couple chapters that it covered in your book there, kind of talking about Saint and the struggles of dog training and temperament and stuff like that. So I figured I'd ask you, what advice would you have for somebody who is looking to go that service dog route?
Oh,
and what to look out for maybe.
Okay. Well, let me preface it with I got lucky. I got lucky in that I didn't go looking for a service dog. I was gifted a dog by one of my brothers who knew I was struggling, and I needed a project. And boy, good Lord Almighty, I got a project. Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, that was entertaining to read about.
Oof. And I don't even know that I could still give it proper, credit. There are no words to describe it, right? So I found a really good trainer locally, and that was good in so many ways. Number one, I don't know who learned more, if it was me or if it was the dog. And I think it's safe to say it was me. A lot of times it's not the dogs that need training, it's the humans, because we don't know how to communicate or read our dogs. So the first thing I learned was how to read my dog, which I wasn't doing correctly. And then I learned how to almost predict what he was going to do before he did it, so I could correct it before it happened. So a good dog trainer will teach you how to do that. Now, I wasted a lot of money on a couple crappy dog trainers who were all about themselves and making money. And one of them went as far as telling me, oh, your dog is dangerous and, he's going to kill somebody. And, you'd be best to just give him to somebody who knows what they're doing. And that was an insult big time. And then I kind of sulked for a while going, what am I going to do now? And then I found the good one. So find a good dog trainer, vet them. Don't just believe, oh, here's one right here, Yellow Pages, Facebook, whatever. Talk to people who've actually used them, vet them. You'll save yourself a lot of frustration and money and time. Okay. That's for any dog, especially a big dog, right? Because they're strong. And when they get bigger, if you don't know how to control your dog, something bad is going to happen. Right. So,
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Some of them are pretty big.
Yeah. And strong, or if you can't get your dog to recall, like mine get out of the house loose all the time because they like to go BYE. I can't say the words, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dogs pick up on those keywords.
Oh yeah. So, they're used to going with me, and there's sometimes I can't take them. So, and especially him, because he's used to going everywhere with me. So you got to be able to recall your dog. You have to. And that means, no, come, and they actually do it immediately. So the first thing I say is for anybody wanting a service dog, don't risk getting your own dog and then trying to turn it into a service dog. Again, I got lucky, real lucky. What I did is not the norm. There are, and they're on my website, there are nonprofit organizations that are professional dog trainers for veterans with PTSD and some for first responders with PTSD as well, that will donate specially trained service dogs for them. One of them is Good Canine Academy out of Itasca, Texas, and the other one is Brothers and Sisters in Arms out of Louisiana. And Ian, the one in Louisiana, Deb is her name. She has now got students that have branched out and started their own places, but I'm not well versed enough, but I can tell you that there are plenty of places out there that are nonprofits. They rescue dogs, they vet the dogs. Some of them make great therapy dogs. Some of them are emotional support animals. Some of them get donated to police departments or airports for bomb sweeping. And then some of them are great service dogs, and the dog's temperament is tested. And that's what these people do. They know how to do it. And then they got to find, like, if you're a veteran and you need a service dog and you're having trouble with night terrors or you'll fill out an application, explain what you're looking for the dog to do for you. And then they'll talk to you, and this will take a little while because they want to make sure that they find the right dog for you and the right human for their dog, because they're very attached to the dog. They put a lot of time and work into these dogs, right?
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It's like matchmaking, So,
it really is.
I mean,
it really
you're
is.
trying to get like the perfect match.
Yeah. You get, and it takes
it's
time.
Not like dogs talk.
No, it's not like you went down to the shelter and adopted a dog. It doesn't work like that at all. So,
that's probably going to give you a lot more headaches than you can imagine doing that.
So there'll be Zooms or there'll be phone conversations, and they'll get to know you better and then figure out what you need. And then they'll start looking. If they don't already have a dog that meets those requirements, they'll start looking for a dog. Now, the lady, Linda, that I deal with Good Canine Academy out of Texas, she rescues dogs all the time. She breeds dogs. She knows breeders. She also gets the, how do you say, flunkies out of the Military Working Dog Institute out of San Antonio. They're too sweet to be military working dogs, but they make great service dogs, right? So she works a lot with them as well and gets a lot of Malleys. Most of her dogs are Malleys. But if let's say you're allergic to dogs and you need a a poodle, for example, or a Labradoodle or something hypoallergenic, she knows breeders, she knows everybody. So if she doesn't have it, she knows where to find it. Right. I know a lot of veterans that have been taken for a lot of money where they put deposits on dogs and then 3 years later, they still don't have a dog because for whatever reason, and those are scams. So I tell veterans all the time, do not pay thousands of dollars for a service dog. Don't do it. Don't go get a dog, or don't take the dog you already have that's 7 years old or 5 years old and then take it to some trainer and say, I want my dog to be a service dog. You really do need to start these dogs young.
I mean, what the old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
You can,
but it's not going to be as effective.
It takes so much time to teach them that by the time they really learn, now they're old. So you want to get them while they're young and at least get the basic obedience out of the way and then start working on the more advanced stuff. Right now with me, the reason I say I got lucky, my dog does almost everything for me naturally. Like when we were doing our obedience classes, the instructor would be like, why doesn't your dog face forward like all the other dogs? Because you know how when you're walking your dog and you were walking along, and then when we would stop and we would say sit, my dog would do an about face and he would sit and point the opposite direction. And the instructor didn't know I had PTSD, didn't know I had MST, didn't know me that well yet. Later on he learned, but at the beginning he didn't know. He's like, what's up with your dog? Why does he want to face? I said, he always does that. Wherever we go, whenever I stop, he turns around and he faces the other direction. Well, then I talked to somebody who did know about service dogs and they're like, oh, he's covering your six. He's doing it naturally.
Which gives you the peace of mind. You just don't realize it, but he's doing it. And,
He just knew that because I don't like when people sneak up behind me. He naturally knew to turn around and cover my six. He wasn't taught that. So I told the trainer, please don't correct that. He's covering my six. Instructor was kind of like, because he's used to training law enforcement dogs, which is always forward, right? I'm like, no, he's covering my six. He's got my back. I don't want to correct that. He's like, okay, if you don't want to correct it, we won't correct it. Fine. And then as time went on, he sleeps with me. He never leaves my side. I couldn't go out in public. I couldn't do crowds. Perfect example is I went to the Dan Crenshaw Summit over the weekend with my daughter, the youth summit in Houston. And it was, they allowed me to go into the room and sweep it before they let anybody in. So we knew where the exits were. And so when we went inside and it was very, very crowded and the music was loud, and don't get me wrong, I was having a blast. I was meeting people that are just like super epic, cool people like Dan Crenshaw and the guys from Black Rifle Coffee and Evan and Matt Best. And there was some really cool people there. Right. And
I saw the pictures on Facebook.
I was having a great time. But then all of a sudden the crowd moves forward and I suddenly found myself sandwiched in and I felt my anxiety go up because I don't like that. I joke, I go, dude, I was social distancing before it was a thing. Right. So I need my bubble. So I gave him the word and he immediately knew how to get me out of there. And he got me straight to it way before my anxiety got the best of me. All I had to do was step out for a few minutes, catch my breath, take it, and I was able to go back in and I just made sure I didn't get in the middle of the crowd again. I just kind of stayed on the outskirts. But before I couldn't go to a mall. I couldn't go into a movie theater. I couldn't without my anxiety being so bad that I could not enjoy myself. After a while, you're like, screw it. I just don't want to go anywhere. You end up becoming a homebody, right? So he naturally did a lot of this for me. And it was very small things we had to teach him, like the word EXIT. Okay. That's how he knows I want to leave. And he'll take me over to it. So.
Wow. It's interesting to see the insight on how it kind of affects your life. I've only talked to a couple of people who have service dogs because unfortunately it's still kind of relatively rare because it's difficult to find the dogs. It's difficult to find a good trainer, the time to get them trained.
The money. A lot of people think it's the money, and that's unfortunate, but I don't know if you know this or not. I posted about it. There's been a bill for a long time that was written. So this isn't any new bill, but it's been stuck. You know how they'll write a bill and it takes forever to get to the floor? Okay. So there's been a bill that's been written for the VA to start investing and funding for PTSD service dogs for veterans. And they finally got it to the floor recently, and it went through, and the president signed it not even about a couple of weeks ago. So the way I understand it, the way it's going to work is I went to a conference about it, is the VA is going to start funding for service dogs for veterans. And it's kind of like let's try this and see. So they're going to give it like a time period, follow up with their veterans, see how the dogs have had an effect on their lives. Have they improved their lives? How have they improved their lives? And I'm sure it's going to be like, like I say, a 2-year time frame, and then get more money, and then 2 more years. And then eventually it'll become hopefully permanent. But they did sign a bill to get the VA to at least consider, funding it, which is going to help a lot of dog trainers who are in this business and spending their own money and relying on fundraising. And that's where my money goes. So like I tell people, like, I am not trying to get rich on my book. We've got challenge coins, and I'm wearing my t-shirt right now. We designed some t-shirts. Anything we can think of that will remind veterans and first responders, hey, you're not alone. You're not the only one. We've all got some bad scars and bad memories, but you're not alone. You need to talk to somebody, not even if not a therapist, a buddy, a friend, somebody. Don't keep letting this shit keep you awake at night, And I have had people call me at 1:00 in the morning, and I will take that call. And it's just to listen, and we need to be there for each other until the government does a better job, honestly. So
I've said that for a long time. The government says they care about us. Civilians say they care about us. But at the end of the day, it stops short somehow. We have to take care of each other. We have to be there for each other.
We do. And I don't think that it's that everybody's failing us. I think it's that we understand each other better. So for us, I know for me, and I don't think I'm alone on this, a lot of it is trust. Well, I don't want to talk to some civilian. They don't understand. They don't get it. We're speaking a language that's over their head. They don't understand the bureaucracy and the red tape. They don't get it. So we don't want to go through the effort of explaining it when I could just call you up and speak the language, the way it is. Yeah. And you're going to understand it because we have we have that language. We understand each other, So I think definitely
a miscommunication there somewhere when you talk to civilians. It's really hard. I'm in the real estate industry, and a lot of my competitors, coworkers, whatever you want to call them, we have to work very closely together, but we're competitors at the end of the day. A lot of them probably know that I'm a veteran, but they don't know where I've been and what I've done, right? We kind of keep those stories to ourselves and share it amongst each other. But I had an incident a few weeks ago. I was in a bar with one of the guys I know real well, and he just started asking me some questions, and I had a few drinks in me. So I started telling some stories, and it kind of felt good to kind of educate a civilian a little bit about my story, but it was so laborsome in a way to just kind of tell the story, like in a way that they'd maybe
understand. And that's what editing my book was like for me.
Noted. I might have to.
Yeah. So when I sent my book off to be, edited by a professional editor, she would redline, or it was Google Docs, but she would highlight areas and be like, a civilian is not going to understand this. You need to plain language it. Because to me, it was plain language, because when you're typing, and I can type 100 words a minute. So when I'm typing and it's just flowing, it's in my mind, it's plain language, but then I need an editor to look at it to say, highlight an area and go, okay, explain this. And this is an area you need to expound on. Not everybody in the real world knows what you mean by this. So I would take one simple sentence. It would become like a half a page to explain what that one sentence really meant,
Yeah.
So, and it's funny, I was talking to a team guy buddy of mine the other day who knows Marcus Luttrell really well, who was able to have this conversation with Marcus. And it was the same thing, because the team guy asked Marcus, dude, why did you go on and on and on about this? And Marcus is like, I know, man. He's like, but the public doesn't understand this stuff. We're team guys. We do. But if the book is going to connect with civilians, you have to put it into a language they understand. And it is sometimes a bit tedious, but it's necessary if you really want your message to get conveyed clearly.
Well, we need those clear messages, because we need to break down that invisible wall that's between the veteran community and civilians.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way they're ever going to completely understand us. But if we want, like I said earlier, we have to look out for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, like you said, civilians aren't failing us. And I agree, they're not failing us, but they're just not maybe equipped enough to help us enough.
They don't
to help
know.
us the right way. They don't know.
They don't
So
know what they don't know.
Right. I've been in, we met in Clubhouse, and I know we've been in some rooms where there's been civilians in there, and us vets are there just talking about stuff. And I've heard it where they're like, you know what? I really appreciate all of you being honest and telling your stories, telling your truth. And they're like, I understand the military and veteran community better now.
Yeah.
And it's like, good. That's one person. That's one more down.
Yes. And I've been able to do that in some rooms as a law enforcement officer with people who hated cops. And if I shut my mouth and all it takes is one person in that room to say, no, she has a right to speak like everybody else does. Because I've been bashed and beaten up and verbally just like torn, and then it depends on my day. Sometimes I have the patience for it. Sometimes I don't, but because and the thing is, I don't go into these rooms looking for it. It'll be one of those cases where the title of the room was a little misleading and I was going into something and didn't know what it was, kind of a deal, and I'll tell them straight up, look, I apologize. I thought this room was about this, and obviously it's not. But since we're on this topic and I've got a little bit of experience with it, do you mind if I, chime in? And as soon as I tell them I'm a cop, it's like, I'm the enemy. I'm the enemy. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, look, we can sit here and hate each other, but we're never going to make progress. I said, I would like to build the bridge. I said, if you guys want to make things better with us and we want to make things better with you, we're going to have to communicate at some point. I said, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask me anything you've ever wanted to ask a cop. Ask me anything. Why do we do this? Why do we do that? I said, I'll tell you the truth. And I said, you may not like it, but I promise you I will tell you the truth. And I did that a couple times. And I actually got a couple guys who said, oh my God, I wish I would have had this conversation with a cop a long time ago. He goes, now what you're explaining makes sense. And so then later I'll go into a room, and if that guy's in there and it happens, I'll go, no, Donna's cool. Listen to what she's got to say, like she's for real. And I'm like, yeah, guys, like I don't have a dog in the fight really anymore. I'm retired, but I hate all this hate that's going on because it's not fair. Am I saying every cop is good? Of course not. Nothing is perfect. There's bad apples in every bunch, but I assure you they are not the percentages that you think they are. Right. So. Absolutely.
Yeah. There's bad apples in every bunch.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw it in the military too. As seen in civilian world, I know you've seen your fair share of it.
Yeah, that would be like
that was
me.
Never good. I mean, you saw bad apples.
And I used that analogy in a room one time, and I was triggered, and I was hot, and I was pissed, and I actually left the room pretty upset. And somebody reached out to me, and was like, "Hey, are you okay?" That was not you. And I'm like, I got a little triggered, and I had to like walk away from it. But I got pissed, and I said, look, you guys labeling all cops because of one asshole would be like me saying all men are rapists. Think about it, right?
Totally.
So you can't do that. It's not fair to humans as a whole. Am I saying be naive and trust everybody? Of course not. But you can't sit there and say all cops are assholes because you've had a couple bad encounters. And in my book, I went into law enforcement having hated cops earlier. I was one of them.
Yeah.
I thought they were all a bunch of arrogant bullies. And then I met one that was a really cool dude who opened my eyes, and I got to see what it was like on the other side of the fence. And I realized it wasn't at all what I thought it was, So we, just like the military, sometimes you got to put on a facade of being tough, but that's just because you're being guarded. You're not really being arrogant. You know what I mean? It's more of being guarded until you feel comfortable letting your wall down to say, okay, this is a good guy. This isn't somebody that wants to kill me. Because where we are, we're literally practically programmed into thinking, just like when you guys go into down country, like you just said earlier, you're surrounded by people who want to attack you. Well, we have the same mindset, but it's here on the U.S. soil. Every traffic stop we make, we assume this is a bad person until we know otherwise. It sucks. And that's what makes us jaded the way we are. But I mean, that's what also keeps us alive. So.
That's true. but we gotta break down the walls because never seen a transparent wall before. Right? If there's a wall in front of you, you can't see what's on the other side. And
although I really would like to see that wall get finished along the Mexican border. Just saying, I'm okay with that one.
I guess that one's kind of semi-transparent. There's some gaps in it, but you can't see what's on the other side of a wall. So you can't sit on this side and say that you know exactly what the other side is. Right? There's a whole nother person on that side. There's things you don't know, and we gotta take those walls down and realize that we're all human beings. We all put our pants on roughly the same way. Yeah, you put one leg in first and the other leg or whatever. But
speaking of which, you want a funny story? Sure,
go ahead.
So as I mentioned, we went to the Houston over the weekend to the Crenshaw Youth Summit. It was all my daughter. She was just, we've been trying to go for like 2 years since COVID hit. It kept getting postponed. We finally made it. So my daughter got on the elevator to go get something or whatever. And she comes back running into the hotel room. Oh my God. Guess who I rode the elevator with? And I'm like, I'm guessing somebody important. She goes, Dan Crenshaw. I'm like, really? And I'm like, she goes, I didn't have my book for him to sign. And I'm like, she goes, but mom, she says, he was wearing shorts and flip-flops. And I started laughing. And she said, I said, well, did you talk to him? And there was just the two of them on the elevator. She goes, Mom, there was no security around him. I said, honey, he's a Navy SEAL. He doesn't need an entourage everywhere he goes.
He doesn't really need security.
Yeah, I'm sure he can handle himself in the elevator, And apparently he only came down to our floor to get a soda out of the vending machine. So it was just for 2 floors. It wasn't like a big deal.
Yeah.
And she's like, you're Dan Crenshaw. And he goes, yes, I am. And she goes, but you're in shorts and flip-flops. And he goes, yep, put my pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else does.
Yep, absolutely.
That was funny.
Awesome. Well, Donna, I appreciate you coming on here. Very happy to have to help highlight your book and the stories that are in it. It was awesome to read through it, especially the parts that were funny.
Yeah.
The parts that were relatable to me, the preemie and stuff, and.
Yeah. My personal favorite is Welcome to the Jungle. That's my favorite chapter. Yeah. The 10 days in the jungle. I will never forget that as long as I live.
It was not difficult really to picture that. You can read some books and you can picture the situation in your mind. The beauty of reading books, right? You can picture how you want. That one was a little easier to picture in some ways.
Yeah, because the environment was so harsh that I remember every miserable moment of it. But I would not trade that experience for anything in the world because I proved something to myself that I had the fortitude to get through the most miserable of situations. And looking back on it, very, very funny ones, because I was the new guy. I was the FNG, so the pranks got pulled on me. So, it was.
Yeah, that's going to happen.
It's a good memory. It's a good memory.
Awesome. Well, that would have been very interesting to be there and see that. It's like the fly on the wall moment, right? But Donna's book, you can get it at courageouslybroken.com. She's got T-shirts. You said coins. I think you got
tumblers or
tumblers. Yeah, I was searching for the word somewhere in the back of my mind.
We have patches in production right now. They're not available online yet, but they're still in production and have been designed. We're always looking for something new that we can put out there that will spread the message. The message is to erase the stigma of PTSD. That is the mission, to erase the stigma, and to let vets and first responders know there is a lot of help out there that you can get on the down low without the fear of repercussions of your agency. There is hope, and there's a lot of help. You just got to know where to find it. So we have a resource page listing those places on my website as well.
Yep, that's awesome. I've got resources on my website as well. I know there's a ton of us that do. Yeah. So go check out mine as well. I've got mine scrolling at the bottom, battlebuddypodcast.net. You can go there, check out my resources. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to check out Donna's and see if there's some I can add to mine, because I'm all about sharing resources if it helps people.
I'll do the same thing.
So,
and that's where my proceeds go, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. My proceeds go at the end of the year. We figure out what the profit is, and then we cut checks to these nonprofits that are that are helping our veterans and first responders. So I'm not, like I tell people, I'm not trying to get rich. I'm just trying not to go poor. I'm obviously trying to make a profit so that I can help others with it. That's my goal.
That's a darn good goal
Yeah.
because a lot of people need help. So
And then
get out there and help
funding.
them. Go support it. Go buy a book, read, go buy a shirt, outfit yourself. Get a cup and put a drink in it, throw on your shirt and read a book in a chair. Then you're all decked out and ready for it.
Yep, exactly.
So thanks again, Donna.
Thank you so much.
I'm gonna put you in the back room here while we wrap up the show.
Okay.